Today, on Monday, June 17, 2024, we are concluding the oral history project aimed at documenting the history of LGBTQ life at the Community College of Baltimore County. We are currently underway with the interview at CCBC Essex featuring Mary Jo Richards, an esteemed associate professor of English at CCBC. Can you confirm your name, pronoun, and where we are?
My name's Mary Jo Richards. I use she, her pronouns. We are at CCBC Essex in the digital recording studio. And today is Monday, June 17th, 2024.
Can you tell us the college experience prior to coming to CCBC?
I had been an educator for 11 years before I came to CCBC. I'm originally from Texas, and I started out as a high school teacher. I taught high school for about 4 years before moving to the community college in Texas. And so I was a staff member and a full-time staff member and an adjunct faculty member at Palo Alto College in San Antonio, Texas, for 7 years. And I basically ran their writing center, their tutoring center for English. And I taught developmental English at Palo Alto College before I came here. And then when I came here, I was hired in 2005 as an adjunct. And then a year later, I was hired full-time as an assistant professor of English.
What made you decide to work here besides the job offer?
Well, my partner and I had moved from Texas to Maryland to be closer to her family. At that time, in 2005, it was shortly after I got my master's degree, and I knew that I wanted my future to be in community college faculty because, as I said, I had spent 7 years in the community college before, and I really loved the community college. I felt that's kind of where I was called to be. And since we settled in Baltimore County when we moved here, it made sense to apply to Community College of Baltimore County, and I applied to other places at the time. But Community College of Baltimore County was the first to reach out and offer me an adjunct position, and then working here, full-time positions became available, and so I applied. After realizing that, Community College of Baltimore County was really a great place to be, and I was enjoying my time as an adjunct.
Academically speaking, can you talk about your position at CCBC and the specific roles you contribute to CCBC in terms of program and community involvement?
Well, I'm associate professor of English, primarily at the Dundalk campus and online. I teach mostly college composition and children's literature. And outside the classroom, I work with the Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning Initiative. I'm on the advisory board, and I also work with the Sustainability Committee at Dundalk. And I'm involved in a number of different committees within my school and my department. And I also volunteer as a writing coach for the Writing and Literacy Centers.
Since you began working here in 2006, how have the attitudes and treatment of the LGBTQ community within the CCBC community evolved over time?
Well, it's a big question. I think that, of course, when I came here, it was a vastly different environment than the one I had come from in Texas. And one of the reasons I left teaching high school in Texas was because it was dangerous to be out and to be queer in Texas in the mid and late 90s as a faculty member in elementary or secondary education. We actually had moral turpitude clauses in our contracts. If we were caught being gay, being bi, being queer, being trans, being anything in public, or caught violating one of the many laws that still existed that worked against sodomy laws, that worked against queer people, we could lose our jobs and we could lose our teaching certifications. So we were obliged to be in the closet and to not talk about our personal lives at all. And I found that really repressive and difficult. I felt like I was like half a person at work. And so I needed an environment that was more open, which is why I went to the community, one of the big reasons I went to the community college in the first place. And I always felt that the community college was much more welcoming in that regard, even back in the days in Texas when things were more restrictive. In 2001, I believe it was, sodomy laws were struck down. And that was a Texas case that went before the Supreme Court and struck down sodomy laws. And that sort of opened the door for a lot of things to start changing in this country. So they had been changing gradually from that point. And when I got here to CCBC, I found that I believe already at that time, if I'm not mistaken, or shortly thereafter, when I got here, sexual orientation was part of the non-discrimination equal employment clause. I remember looking at that specifically because I wanted to make sure I was going to a safe place to be. And when I got here, right away, I found that there were already, there was already LGBT student organizations, particularly in the form of the Rainbow Club at the time it was called. Dr. Morgan Slusher was in charge of the one here at Essex and had been for quite some time. And there were also a variety of faculty and staff who were out and who were open. And so I never felt I couldn't be out about who I was, open about who I was. And at that point in my career, I was kind of like, well, regardless of how they feel about it, I'm going to be out and open, because if they don't want me here, I don't want to be here. And fortunately, that was never the case. I never was made to feel like I wasn't welcome here because of my sexual orientation.
In your view, how has the representation of LGBTQ individuals in leadership or influential roles in CCBC evolved since you came?
Oh, well, a little bit like we were talking about before the cameras went on. We were talking about sort of like the evolution of efforts at inclusivity and equity and diversity, and at the college, they've changed over time. And certainly I see that has grown significantly. And it's grown not just for students, but also for faculty and staff. So I think that now, thanks to DEI efforts and efforts of groups like Classy, we're seeing folks have much more of a voice in governance of the college and policy making. And we're seeing that voice come from all levels, come from students, faculty, staff, and administration as well. Earlier when I was here, you kind of had to get lucky and have a good administrator who was in your corner and on your side. And I was fortunate that from the beginning of my time here, we had some of those administrators who were either part of the LGBT community themselves or were advocates in some way. Sometimes they were accidental advocates, but all the same, if they chose to embrace an issue or chose to tackle a topic, well, then it got addressed. But we didn't really have the same sort of widespread grassroots movement that I see that we do now, where it's sort of a bottom-up movement instead of just a top-down movement. And that's good, that's important.
Are there any ongoing challenges or areas where you feel CCBC can still improve in terms of LGBTQ support and inclusivity?
Oh, well, one of those I addressed a little bit earlier, and I think that I don't know what the plans are here at the college for having gender inclusive dressing rooms in the gymnasiums, but I think that could be very helpful if we had, if you go to private gyms, for example, or places like the YMCA, they have family dressing rooms, right? They call them family dressing rooms, and they're generally for parents with little children, but anybody can use them that feels they need them. And I think it would be extremely helpful, since we are a community college and the community can use our gyms as well as members of the college community, the community at large can use them, I think it'd be very helpful if we had greater access by way of family dressing rooms. I know we don't have them on the Dundalk campus. I know there's been some remodeling that has happened to the athletics and the gymnasium facility here at Essex. I don't know if those dressing rooms have been installed or if there's a plan to do that. But as last I was informed about it, they didn't yet exist.
Has there been queer inclusion in classes, and how can we move forward with that?
To my knowledge, we don't offer queer studies like here at CCBC. There are different, and that would be wonderful if we did. We certainly have precedent for offering studies centered around identity, whether that be racial identity or gender identity. We have women's studies courses. We have Africana studies courses. We have Native American studies courses. It would be great to add queer studies to that, that catalog. The way we sort of have addressed queer issues in the classroom has really been dependent on the course and the subject. We teach human sexuality here, and that's part of the curriculum. Teaching about LGBTQ identity development is part of the course curriculum. I also teach, one of the classes that I teach sometimes is Human Services Counseling 104, and that's developing cultural proficiency in a diverse world. And one of the units in that class is about developing LGBTQ identity. And so in that unit, I talk to students about the variety of identities that fit under our big rainbow umbrella and what those acronyms mean. And there's room to talk about, issues that maybe students haven't felt comfortable talking about, or asking questions that they haven't felt comfortable asking, and thinking about their own identities and where those fit, and thinking about their own privilege and what that looks like relative to other groups. So we do address it in I'd say many of our courses. We probably have literature teachers teaching literature by queer authors, and we no doubt have historians teaching little bits and pieces of queer history. I really hope somewhere in American history they're talking about the Stonewall riots. If they're not, I hope they soon will.
How do feedback and suggestions from the LGBTQ community and its allies within CCBC shape policy or cultural shifts?
Oh, well, kind of like I've said earlier, I think a lot of the change that happens gets driven by people who go forth and make their needs known. Oftentimes, there have been times when the college has taken a more proactive position, but oftentimes it's been reactive, right? It's waiting to be presented with an issue or shown that there's a problem, because the nature of privilege is that you don't see that there's a problem because there's not a problem for you, right? And as long as there's not a problem for you, everybody must be fine, right? And until somebody comes forward and says, no, we're not fine, oftentimes we're blind to it, right? And so change, just like the examples I gave of my students, my Rainbow Club students who went forth and advocated for those gender-inclusive bathrooms. They were also, I should say, advocating for the gender-inclusive dressing rooms at the time, but we're told, oh, that's just not possible. We can't do that. And I would hope that we've started to see that these things are possible, and that the world doesn't end when they happen, and that, in fact, people pretty much just roll with it and get on with life when changes happen, such as the bathrooms around campus. I guess like anything, it's important to kind of find your tribe, whoever they may be, but to also recognize that just because people fall under the rainbow umbrella, it doesn't necessarily mean they are your tribe, right? Not everybody has your best interests at heart, and it's important to surround yourself with people who are truly supportive and who are truly allies and who are willing to hear you and see you for who you are and go to bat for you when times are tough. Because unless people are willing to be true allies and they're just sort of paying lip service to, showing up for Pride celebrations, but then not really doing the work that's required to make sure that people feel safe on a day-to-day basis, then they're not the allies they think they are. And so I think finding your tribe and surrounding yourself with people who are going to support you and who believe that you are a full human being who is entitled to happiness and success and productivity and willing to support you in whatever you want to do. I think you've got to cultivate those sorts of networks, and that can be challenging. So reaching out, talking to people can be really scary, especially when you're kind of first coming in. Maybe some people coming into the college environment are just starting to question their identity, just starting to develop their identity, and they don't know who the safe people are to kind of reach out and ask questions of. They don't know who the safe people are to maybe befriend, and that can be difficult, which is why places like, the GSA and the Rainbow Club and all the different iterations of these organizations that we've had over the years, that's one of the really important purposes that they serve, is giving people a safe place to land. And even safe zones training, having those little, I know there are those who would laugh at this idea of safe zones and question their true need for them. But when you're walking around campus and you're new and you don't know anybody, and maybe you are nervous, you're anxious, you're afraid, and you have questions, just seeing a visual symbol that indicates that, oh, maybe there's a person behind this door and I can knock on this door and maybe they would help me. Look for those allies.